Alrighty. Good morning. Welcome to College Coffee Talk. Andy Lockwood from Lockwood College Prep. Pearl Lockwood, my co-host, is out on special assignment, taking one of our kids to the doctor. So I will be attempting in my own way, which I don't think will be successful, but I'll try to fill her tiny little baby shoes. To fill her shoes. So welcome. Pearl's not here, so I'm all off kilter. I don't even have coffee for College Coffee Talk, but if you have coffee, join me in or something else. In my case, I have water. Join me in a synchronized sip, like we always do every week here at 10 a.m. 1, 2, 3. I am so well hydrated. I'm so up for this. So welcome. Let me know I'm coming in loud and clear in the chat. I'm just going to check Facebook right here on my phone, and I'm also simultaneously going to tell you about what we are going to be discussing. There's been a lot of kerfuffle, a lot of failure specifically on the new simplified FAFSA. And it seems like each week there's a new story or new angle that comes out, and this past week is really no different, because a lot of colleges now are starting to review those FAFSAs, which is, if you're uninitiated, the free application for federal student aid. It is the main financial aid application that every college in the country requires, but there's been a huge amount of problems because the Department of Education had 2 years to implement a new financial aid formula. That was what the law required. What they did is they changed the formula, which I'll give a little bit of background on, but I don't want it to take up too much time here. But it also rewrote or redid the coding on the FAFSA platform that supposedly hadn't been changed since like the 80s. So they bit off a lot, right? And it's looking like it was a lot more than they could chew because of all of the problems. First, it was delays. Then, like I alluded to earlier today, once colleges started getting the results, they became a little wacky. And Pearl has seen already some things that make you raise your eyebrow in terms of the mistakes that are happening on the FAFSA. And the issue is, you can probably guess, the issue is that if they're going to be making mistakes on the FAFSA, how do you know for sure that you're going to get the money that you deserve? And even if you don't qualify for need-based aid, you're still being delayed in terms of making the decision whether to attend that school or not, because colleges have been pushing back their deadlines to accommodate these delays that were caused by this FAFSA program overhaul. So the Wall Street Journal reported a few days ago that 30% of the FAFSAs have errors, and out of those, and as of last week, I think this was on the April 12th, 60% of the records that they would normally have gotten have come in. So there's a lot of FAFSAs that haven't been filed, and out of those 60%, about 20 have either been rejected or plagued by technical errors or calculation inaccuracies. Overall 30% have errors. What's interesting that doesn't really get reported as much is some of these errors are to the good. Some of these errors are inflating people's eligibility, but most of them are deflating people's eligibility. So anyway, let me know that I'm coming in loud and clear. Let me see who's with us today. Pop in. I don't know if I can actually see the comments here, but I see a bunch of people here. If you have questions about this, which I imagine people do, then go ahead and lob them in here. So let me see. Good morning to Michelle. Happy tax day. Yeah. We actually have a pretty good accountant, so it's not as bad as it used to be. All right. Let me see. Anyone else has specific questions? I'm going to pop them in right here, and I will get to your questions. So I think the thing that you need to be aware of is that it's up to you to affirmatively question your financial aid award when you get it. So Pearl had mentioned to me from her remote location that she saw one client that she originally had filed a FAFSA for, and that generated what's known as a student aid index. It used to be the EFC. The student aid index is supposed to symbolize what a family can afford for 1 year of college. And then after that information was downloaded and quote unquote corrected by the college, it went from $4,500 to $27,000. My guess is that the $27,000 was more accurate in this case. But what you really need to do is to take control of your situation as you start getting financial aid awards. And if you see your student aid index and it looks weird to you, and I'll give you a sort of a quick and dirty back of the napkin way to calculate your student aid index in a moment. But what you really should be doing is contacting the financial aid office, which probably won't be easy, by the way, unfortunately. But contact the financial aid office and question it and say, I don't know if you got my accurate tax return information, because that's one of the big problems with the student aid index and the new simplified, quote unquote, improved FAFSA. It's not pulling in information correctly from the IRS website. That was one of the new improvements that was supposed to make things a lot easier to do. So in terms of just back of the napkin, how to calculate your own student aid index, this is a very rough way to do this. So don't hold me to this. This is just an approximation. But income is far and away the most important factor in financial aid, in the calculations for your eligibility. So the penalty, so to speak, or the amount of your income that gets assessed by the financial aid rules and into your student aid index is up to 47% of your adjusted gross income. However, there's a chunk that's not included in that. So it's not $1 of your adjusted gross income. But hypothetically, if you made, let's say, $150,000, right? 47% of that would be, about 70 something thousand bucks. Your student aid index, if you make $150,000 just from your income alone, it's probably going to be somewhere in the high 40s, give or take. So as a rule of thumb, I would say take about a third of your adjusted gross income, and that part of it will go into the calculation of your student aid index. Again, meaning how much the formulas think that you can afford for 1 year of school. Now, there's other things that go into the formulas, and there's other things that do not go into the formulas, such as expenses. So let's just put that aside for now. I don't mean to get too technical here, but this is really third grade arithmetic, so bear with me. So if your income contribution is roughly 100 for a salary or adjusted gross income of $150,000, if your contribution from that alone is about $50,000, let's say, what they also look at are savings. But savings are penalized at a far lesser level than income. Your savings, parent savings, are penalized at roughly 5.64%. Actually, not roughly. So if you had $100,000 saved in your name, then your student aid index gets boosted by $5,600 and change. You want a lower SAI, not a higher one, right? So those two together would be $56,000 and change. So that would be an approximation of your student aid index. So if you make less money, if you make $100,000 or less, then your student aid index might be in the $30,000 range or so. So if that's the case, and you've done this sort of back of the napkin calculation, and then you look at your actual award that comes in, and you ask them for the SAI if you can't find it, and let's say that's $60,000, even though you think it should be $30,000, that is a new basis for appeal. So I'm gonna go over the three sort of traditional bases for appealing a financial aid award after I talk about this one, because this is the new one, which is there was a mistake on the FAFSA that the FAFSA created, not me. So you've got to be extra diligent and question everything. And you might be wrong, but it's worth trying. So what I would do is contact the financial aid office, figure out from them, what the process is, the protocol to appeal your financial aid award. And then that's your argument that, look, when I calculated my student aid index, it was a lot lower. Here is my adjusted gross income. Can you recalculate this yourself? Now, just so you know, financial aid officers all across the country are actually doing this, but it's laborious, and they are, behind the scenes, they are just barraged with all sorts of stuff like this happening, and other things that probably haven't made it into the news yet. So that is entirely inappropriate grounds for appeal, and we've already seen some people making those appeals. And I heard a story about a client who was told by the financial aid officer at a small liberal arts college that, no, I'm looking at your file right now, and let me tell you this proactively, that the student aid index is incorrect. So sometimes they can actually be on your side. I think in this case, this is going to be a good year for appealing, because everyone knows that there's a huge amount of problems. So what are the other grounds for appeal? I've talked about this before, but this is sort of peak appeal season, so I want to mention it right now. Income, expenses, and other offers. So if you have someone to graduate 2024, they're looking at your income from 2 years ago, 2022. If since then your income has dropped significantly, they don't know about that, because that's not part of the financial aid disclosures. That doesn't go anywhere on the financial aid applications. So it's incumbent upon you, again, you've got to take charge here. It's incumbent on you, again, to tell them, listen, I recognize that you gave me an award based on the data that I gave to you, but there's been an update, and you don't know this new information. So let me tell you about what's happened since I filed. Could have been laid off. Maybe you're self-employed and you lost a big client. Maybe your 22 income was artificially inflated because you had some sort of windfall. Maybe you sold some stocks or something, or you sold a business, and that doesn't happen every year. Whatever, that's one possible strong argument. The one about expenses is also kind of interesting, because if you remember, if you're watching the beginning of today, I mentioned that expenses don't really count in the financial aid formulas, because there are no questions about expenses. However, if you had extraordinary expenses, and it's usually bad stuff, right? Expenses in general, I would say, are pretty bad, but this is like severely bad stuff. So let's say that you had a bankruptcy, and you had to pay lawyers a ton of money, or you got divorced and you had to pay the lawyers a lot of money. I don't know if you see a theme here. Or you had some sort of, very costly property damage, and like a hurricane ripped through, and you can't get your insurance company to cover the expenses. And by the way, if they can cover the cost of repairs, then you can't use that argument. I was talking to a client at the end of last week who, on paper, doesn't look like she qualifies for much because her income is a little bit too high, but she had $20,000 worth of unreimbursed medical expenses each of the past 2 years, in 2022 and in 2023. For I think one was for her, one was for her child. Those are significant. I mean, those are very real types of developments that the financial aid office should know about, because they have a material effect on your ability to pay for college. So unusually high expenses. And my favorite to use, and not every college will actually admit that they do consider this, but if you're applying to 2 colleges or more that compete with each other, and one gave you a higher award, I would definitely tell your top choice school about the other higher award. And I would say, look, you're my top choice school, but the numbers aren't working for us. Is there any way that you can possibly meet or maybe even exceed the offer from college B? Then that's going to do it for us. And some colleges will say, oh, we don't consider offers like this from competitors. And some colleges, I think Cornell still does this. I haven't looked at their appeals form yet this year, but for many years, including last year, they would say, here are the grounds that we will consider an appeal. And it's just like I was explaining to you. One was unusual expenses. Another one was a drop of income. And the third was an offer from another Ivy League school or MIT or Duke. They just lay it out there in black and white, which I give them credit for. So those are, in a nutshell, the grounds for appeals. But don't overlook what's happening with the student aid index and the FAFSA data and everything that's being pumped into your FAFSA. And the real issue is that you don't even know about it. Like that's the hardest thing. You can't even discover this on your own because it's invisible. It's all behind the scenes. So, all right. So let me go through some comments here. Hello to Corbett. How do we know if the calculations are correct or not? I gave you the back of the napkin way to do it. But you're going to have to, learn up on it. But if you missed my back of the napkin explanation, then once this is wrapped up here today, you can go back and watch the replay. Watch it again and again, like cats, the show. Run, don't walk. Good morning to Maria. Good morning to Edith. Donna Thompson, 2 kids, 2 FAFSAs, $3,000 difference in SAIs. That's interesting. That may, sometimes there are other explanations besides just downloading errors. Sometimes things are a little bit different from kid to kid. Like, for example, one kid could have a job and one not, so their income would be different, and that could affect the calculation. So let me know if that's the case, because we've seen that before. Okay, Michelle Vaccarelli. My daughter's been accepted to Hofstra. They stated in order to get some merit aid, she needed an 85 or above GPA at the time of her acceptance, and she was just below that at the time. However, now with her mid-year transcript, she's above that 85 GPA. Would she be able to appeal the merit aid with Hofstra? And when? If we ever get an award letter? Yeah, I would definitely appeal that. Particularly if you have better offers from other schools. Even if you don't, I would still appeal that. And should you wait before the FAFSA is processed or sent? I don't know if I would wait. I would get that in now, and then if you have more grounds for appeal after the FAFSA, then just go back to the well one more time. All right, Shrey. Hi, Indian Pearl. My friend's daughter, who's a junior in college, just got married last week. She's pregnant. Wow. I told my friends to file FAFSA again as she's independent. Anything else to mention or ask in the new FAFSA? That's interesting. I don't know if Pearl's watching this. I don't think. Well, you would think that if you're married, you are now independent. I think that is the rule, but I would just double check that. I don't know if I'd refile because, well, it depends on how much income her husband makes too, right? So if things are better for you to refile and appeal, I would try that for sure. All right. Hello to Chris, Sandra, KJ, Thomas, Preetam, and Christina. It used to be that if you had 2 kids in college, there would be more aid awarded. There's nothing on the FAFSA application this time. Is that not considered? Very good question, Christina. That I at the top of the hour, I did allude to that there were some changes in the substance of the rules, and sadly, and this is on behalf of you, other parents, our clients, and me. Pearl and I have 3 kids in college right now. Sadly, that was one of the, I would say, the crappiest changes that were effectuated by the new FAFSA. They took that, it was a quote unquote sibling discount. They took that out. So it used to be that 2 families, had identical financial positions, same income, same savings, whatever. And let's say that the first family had 1 kid in college, and let's say he had a $60,000. The mom and the dad had a $60,000 student aid index. Back in the old days, EFC last year, but $60,000 contribution. With 2 kids in college, that could be closer to $30,000 because it got split. The family contribution got split between the 2 kids. But supposedly now with the new rule, it's not. It's $60,000 whether you have 2 or 3 or 4 kids in college, just the same as if you had 1 kid in college. What we are seeing anecdotally in our own practice, because Pearl files something like 400 families worth of financial aid applications every year. What we're seeing anecdotally is that's an appealable thing also. And so far, colleges are using their discretion to not necessarily apply the formula that way, but it's that's no guarantee. It's definitely uneven, and it's weird. It's a weird rule change. There was one good rule change, which was, and by the way, if you have questions, pop them in right now. We have another 8 minutes here. I've got one more topic to cover, but if there's too many questions on this, I'm going to punt till next week to talk about the brag sheet, the student brag sheet. Anyway, you need to use any means necessary, or any argument necessary to come up with an appeal for financial aid. So far this year, it looks like colleges are using the discretion to not automatically penalize people for having more than one kid in college at the same time. That's the flip side of looking at it. But come up with whatever argument you can to appeal your award. All right. I see some more stuff coming in here, so that's good. All right. Christine Shrey. All right, Dina. Hi, Andy. To Maria, congratulations on the Hofstra acceptance. I would request an in-person meeting with financial services. Face-to-face is always best. They don't want to meet with you face-to-face if they can avoid it, because they're bombarded with applications like this. So I would actually, I don't think it's a bad idea to meet face-to-face. I think that is a good idea, but I would appeal first in writing. Call them first, just see. But you're going to have a hard time. Most colleges are inundated. So some of the smaller ones, you might do better at a Hofstra than you would at a University of Buffalo or something. But yeah, if you can do it, do face-to-face. Most financial aid officers are sympathetic. So the face-to-face thing is the best way to convey that. And don't drive up in a BMW or a Mercedes. All right, Cindy, does the student aid index take retirement savings into account? And if they don't, would the private colleges take that into account from the CSS? Okay, so one of the other changes I started to talk about is not related to this question. So let me answer this question, then I'll go back to what I was saying before I lost my train of thought. Retirement accounts should not be included at all on the FAFSA. The FAFSA says very specifically exclude retirement accounts. So if you mistakenly put your retirement accounts in there, then that's grounds for appeal too. You made a mistake. It's not just not only necessarily the FAFSA that made a mistake. Maybe you did. The weird thing about the retirement accounts on the CSS profile is that they're asked for, but allegedly colleges do not consider those. I'm a little cynical about that, but I think for the most part they don't. But you have to disclose it anyway, so there's really not much to discuss. One of the good changes that I started to mention before that we've seen a little bit is that in the past, before the new FAFSA, if a grandparent paid for college, then the following year that would negatively impact a student's eligibility for aid. It would reduce eligibility. No longer. That's no longer the case. Now grandparents can send money in without any negative impact on kids' eligibility. So that's a pretty good change. Some of the other bad changes were for divorced families and for business owners. I think it's a little bit has got to be in flux. So let's say here. Okay, can you repeat the SAI calculation? Just go back and watch it at the beginning because I have a lot of questions here. I apologize. Dina says definitely call first before you just show up in financial aid. Yeah, I would totally do that. Call first. Okay, good. So if you have more questions, pop them in here. Let me talk very briefly. This is for younger kids about the student brag sheet. So this time of year, early spring, is when a lot of guidance counselors and school counselors at private high schools will send home a form asking parents and kids, sometimes each, to write up like a bio or a brag sheet. So it may be called something else at your high school, but no matter what they call it, what they're asking you to do is pretty much tantamount to writing your own guidance counselor letter of recommendation, because most guidance counselors, even at private high schools, don't know their kids particularly well. Some do, but for the most part, they don't. So how do you write up a brag sheet if you're asked to do so as a parent and if you're asked to do so as a child. Well, this may seem kind of dumb, right? But obviously, you don't trash yourself. This is no time to be falsely humble, falsely modest. This is a time to brag. That's why some high schools call it a brag sheet, but not in an annoying way. I think you can list accomplishments in order of importance, from most significant to least, in a section that will ask you to list accomplishments, things you're proud of, or something like that. I think that's important. What's really important that gets overlooked a lot is this is an opportunity to highlight stuff that admissions officers really care about, but it's not actually on the college applications. I'm talking about character. So it's a good chance to highlight how the student helps out other people in class, participates in class, deals with setbacks or adversity, maybe a bad grade, or maybe something, in something else in high school happened and they got through it. Being proactive and showing quote unquote leadership doesn't mean you have to be captain or president of every club, but it certainly could mean, how you stepped up and took control of a project when other kids in your group didn't do that. That's the way high school works in general, and college too. You'll have, in group projects, you'll have one person usually who steps up and does like 80% of the work in that group project. My daughter, Lizzie, who's home from Michigan, she's got a minor in the Ross Business School. So she takes classes, a few classes with other business school students. And she was pointing out that she was that kid who was, doing all the work, a lot of the work, compared to some of the business school kids, the brilliant business school kids who are just kind of sitting back and letting her do it. Right. So that continues, that continues even into college and into life. But in high school, if that's the case, if you're that kid or your child is that kid, this is the time to say that on the brag sheet without putting other people down. It'll talk about being proactive and stepping up and showing initiative and all that. So think of the brag sheets as not only about, listing off volunteer hours and good grades and showing hard working, but think of it also as an opportunity to talk about character. I actually see, sitting in on today's session, a mom who's got a son who has exceptional character in terms of perseverance and being hardworking and all that. I can actually probably say that about two families I just noticed off the top of my head. So if that's you, this is the opportunity to do that, and don't be shy. Lay it all out. You don't have to use a lot of adjectives and flowery language, but I would just very matter-of-factly state that here are the things that that I think are noteworthy that you should know about. But each brag sheet or the equivalent has its own format and own protocols in terms of how to follow it. But generally, that's what you have an opportunity to do here, which is to round out the application by coaching the school counselor or the guidance counselor about what to write. Basically, they're plagiarizing. I think that's the way that I look at it. All right, we are out of time here. Is there any? Yeah, I see some more questions here. So I will get into the comment section, hopefully later today, if not by tomorrow. So keep your eye on this, whether you're watching it live or watching it on replay, for me to answer those. And if you have any questions, in addition, this is a great opportunity to pop them in here. Thanks a lot for being with us this week, and we'll be back next week. I think we're going to be home, and one of these weeks we're going to be remote from a college campus, if we can actually pull that off. So that's so exciting. God, I can't wait. All right. Have a great week.